remember, initially it was Jack Smith who wanted to rush a case to the U.S. Supreme Court on whether or not President Trump had any post-presidential immunity from acts that were taken during his presidency. The Supreme Court said no. Ultimately, the case got to the U.S. Supreme Court, and when it did, it was a blow to Jack Smith. But there was a different case brought initially, remember, by one of the January 6th, those who were in prison found guilty, and he challenged one of his charges, and that was that the charge that it was an obstruction of an official proceeding, and the Supreme Court found that that was not, in fact, what that meant under the law, so that a protest would not be an obstruction of an official proceeding. And this was someone who actually entered in to the Capitol. So they are still in, I don't know if they're still in prison, but they were still found guilty on other charges that they were not successful in appealing on. But the Supreme Court tossed that charge. Well, 2 of the 4 charges Jack Smith brought in Washington, D.C. against Donald Trump would be thrown out then under that theory. The first is a lesser obstruction, which is a conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, which, of course, you can't be part of if the act itself, speaking at the rally, is not the obstruction of an official proceeding. So you take 2 out, what are you left with? Conspiracy to defraud the United States, which is very broad and pretty weak, actually, and then conspiracy against rights, another one, which is very weak, the 2 weakest charges. So they were supposed to have a joint status meeting on this case. It was supposed to be in, August 16th, so pretty soon. And Jack Smith has said they need this to at least be no earlier than August 30th because they can't yet figure out what charges and how to bring a case against Donald Trump. Now, let's remember the ACLJ filed in both of the cases, Fisher and the Trump case, Jack Smith on presidential immunity at the U.S. Supreme Court. The cases which may ultimately undo Jack Smith's entire prosecution. Remember, in Florida as well, in Florida, he was found to not be a valid appointment by the Department of Justice. That has been a notice of appeal, has gone to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, so that's certainly not going to be determined anything, probably finalized before the election in November.
What you see here is the Judge Chutkan, had put this on the schedule for, it came out last Friday, that by August 16th, they were going to have a status conference for the case. And when you see Jack Smith, who's had, by that time, will have had a month and a half since the decision came out on July 1st to figure out how to move forward, asking for more time, saying that both sides need to be able to file their briefs on August 30th, so 3 weeks after the original date of August 16th, and then saying the hearing needs to be after that. You can tell that there's probably disarray within the Office of Special Counsel of trying to figure out what's immunity, what's not going to stand, and also there's the question of what happened with Eileen Cannon down in Florida, which threw out the indictment of Donald Trump because she said that the special counsel himself was unconstitutionally appointed. So we'll see if that even plays in as well.
I want to go to my dad, Jay Sekulow, because this is another case that we've involved in with both briefs we filed in at the U.S. Supreme Court, Dad. First was the Fisher case that we got the decision on June 28th. That case specifically knocked out likely 2 of the 4 charges Jack Smith wanted to bring against Donald Trump in D.C., the conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding and the obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding. So those 2, Dad, I think were already DOA, and now he's asking for more time to figure out if the additional 2 charges survive the Supreme Court decision either.
Yeah, and I think the answer to that is going to be they don't. And Jack Smith has come to the realization that his whole operation is just about up. I mean, we know about these special counsels because we litigated and dealt with it with Bob Mueller. And the problem that you have here is the Supreme Court opinion. And by the way, it not only affected the situation down in Florida, but it also affects the New York prosecution, the state prosecution, because there, in the Supreme Court opinion, the court said that you cannot have any evidence of wrongful acts, basically, if in fact it was official acts of the president. The court can't get involved in that. So this idea in New York that they let in all of this evidence, as you know, all this evidence was let in that would now not be admissible, including the evidence of witnesses that worked in the White House. Then as it relates to the January 6 issues, Jack Smith is facing the same problem. What this comes down to, Jordan, at the end of the day here is they can't figure out under these Supreme Court decisions how they can get their evidence in, and that's why they keep calling these opinions extraordinary.
At what point, Dad, does someone like Judge Chutkan, who's accepted the delays, obviously, when the Supreme Court decided to hear the case, that would be normal, but then sets a date for August 16th, and then Jack Smith comes back. Usually he's trying to rush things, and now it's, I need at least another 2 weeks. It's not like the Trump team doesn't want to give him that, because it shows a lot. Of course, we're talking about it right now, but they're obviously having serious issues. I mean, in one case, he's been found to be illegitimate and as a prosecutor, and that's being just the notice of appeal has just been filed there in the 11th Circuit. But the idea here that they were down to maybe 2 charges after June 28th, and then after the July 1st decision by the Supreme Court, they may not have anything. And they would have to almost restart. I don't think there's an appetite for that.
I don't think there is an appetite to restart. They'd have to call the new grand jury. They're not going to be doing that. I think Jack Smith's in a free fall, legally speaking. They had 2 cases go against them significantly. The most significantly, it curtailed their authority in one, and in the other one, it raised the immunity issue raised so many evidentiary points for the special counsel that I don't think they can move forward on a case. So, and by the way, the Supreme Court took the position we advocated in our briefs that the president was immune from prosecution for official acts he took as president, which, by the way, you would think every president would want that same kind of protection. So the Supreme Court got it right. Jack Smith, in 6 weeks now, has not been able to figure out, Jordan, how to move forward on their case. That's what this really is.
Yeah, so let's say you give him 2 more weeks. So what is 2 more weeks really going to be for Jack Smith? There's just another 2 weeks to try and figure out if they can figure out something that they can file without looking ridiculous or having to tell the court that they've got to wait. Because I think at that point, I don't know that the court wants to keep waiting anymore on every single decision, especially the decision from the Supreme Court to say, listen, you've got to go through every specific act with a presumption of immunity when a president who's in office, and then determine, did an act, like, at what point does an act cross the line where it's no longer official and could be criminal? I mean, and that is a very fact-specific decision to make. I don't think there's just a rule that you can make on that. And even if there is, that's got to go all the way through the court system again.
I think what Jack Smith is trying to do in the next 2.5 weeks, Jordan, is evaluate whether they can even move forward. I would not be shocked if there ends up being motions to dismiss. It's very conceivable that the government may not be able to proceed at all. They may move on their own. I'm hard-pressed to think they would do that, but you look at it, you think that's what's coming.
Well, we know what's coming from the left and the Democrats is going to be, this is why we have to, we have to pack the court. We have to put term limits on the court. So they've kind of set the stage for Jack Smith to do this by blaming the U.S. Supreme Court. That's what he'll do.
Yeah, because right now you got Jack Smith. You got one court saying that the appointment of the special counsel was unconstitutional, which, by the way, we advocated for that when we had the Mueller probe going. And then, on the other hand, they're saying that the president is also immune.
Depending on what the 11th Circuit does, if they say it's special counsels are okay, the Supreme Court could leave it there because there's been some history of having special counsels. If they say, you know what, now that you're challenging it, we don't think it is, because if you're a U.S. attorney, you have to go through confirmation and you still have limited jurisdiction. How then can the Department of Justice pick whoever they want to have unlimited jurisdiction to bring these criminal charges that a U.S. attorney could not if it was outside their state, or if not even their state, but their region within a state?
Sometimes you will see an activist judge that tries to say, I'm making law for the entire country, I'm making a ruling, and those quickly get, you typically see a injunction very quickly from the appeals court on something of that magnitude, because the appeals court wants to make sure they get their eyes on it before they're setting national precedent. And a lot of times those do go straight to the Supreme Court relatively quickly when it's something that a district court judge is trying to make a national injunction or make national precedent on.